The picture for the NHS in Wales is very stark. Let's go back to 2013. Labour had been in power in Wales for 14 years at that point, and it's been Labour in charge as well in the decades since. We're going to compare 4 of the key NHS performance measures on this graph. And when something goes below this dotted line, it means things are better than 2013. Anything above this dotted line means things are worse. 3 times, 5 times, 7 times worse, and so on. So one of our measures, people still on the waiting list for elective care, care that's planned in advance, after 26 weeks. It did see some improvement in 2018 before COVID, but by 2020, it was still more than 4 times worse than 2013. Let's look at some other metrics. Well, as you might expect, given that rise in 26-week waits, the overall elective care waiting list also went up. Next, patients waiting 4 hours in A&E. It improved their look in 2014, but since then, despite a small dip in 2018, 4-hour waits rising consistently. It's a similar picture for those waiting 8 hours in A&E, this dark green line, more than 3 times worse in 2020 than 2013. Now, more evidence of the COVID effect on these measures. 2021, you'll see, showed some signs of improvement in some areas, but that was because people stayed away from the NHS thinking they were protecting it, even though health bosses were encouraging people to seek treatment. And here's what happened next. By 2023, 4-hour A&E waits were 3 times worse than 2013. 8-hour A&E waits more than 5 times worse than 2013. The elective care waiting, they're still heading in the wrong direction. And those 26-week waits for elective care we started with are now nearly 7 times worse than 2013. And only just starting to come down. Now, the Welsh Government points out that there has been a marked increase in demand for NHS care, both planned and emergency, over the last decade. And it says it's given additional funding and new services to support this. And it says the NHS is making good progress in reducing long waiting times. From primary care to hospital treatment, the NHS in Wales has rarely faced this level of sustained pressure.
Kieran Jenkins there with data on NHS Wales. And we should clarify that some of those patients will be waiting for more than one medical procedure and so might appear more than once in the figures. So those are the numbers, but what about the patients affected by all of this? Our Home Affairs correspondent Andy Davis is in Cardiff for us. Andy.
Jackie, the Welsh NHS has really been struggling with those long waits of several years or more for treatment. And despite some progress, targets to eliminate those waits have been repeatedly missed. We've been looking at one particular target area, diagnostics. These are the tests like endoscopies, MRI scans, which many of us need to work out what condition or disease we might have or not have before any treatment. And we all know how vital early diagnosis can be in terms of surviving cancer, for instance. Well, 2 years ago, the Welsh Government said that it wanted to hit by this spring its target that no one in Wales should wait more than 8 weeks for a diagnostic test. But as you're about to see, that's highly unlikely to happen. And I should let you know, by the way, that there are some images of medical procedures in my report.
I had part of my bowel removed. I've had my gallbladder removed.
Charlotte Williams from Crosshands in Carmarthenshire has spent much of her adult life managing health issues. 3 years ago, she was experiencing acute discomfort.
I've always had funny toilet habits due to surgery, but my toilet habits have become extreme. So I was going to toilet up to 30 times a day. I was extremely tired. I was finding severe blood and mucus in my stools. And I just felt that that was most really necessary to get to the GP as soon as possible.
It had taken years, but with further tests finally came a diagnosis: Crohn's and colitis, types of inflammatory bowel disease. Yet despite treatment, Charlotte continues to be in pain. Last August, she was told she needed an MRI scan, but had to wait nearly 5 months for it.
And that's all you ever get is you just got to wait, there's a backlog. Having to have pain every day is quite worrying. So having to worry for that long, physically, your body's already going for it, but mentally, that weight, it's debilitating. it can really take over your life and your thinking, the way that you keep thinking each thing. You're thinking, God, is that? What if it's not that? Because they said I've got that, but what if it's not that? What if it's something more now? It's got worse.
In 2022, the Welsh Government set a target that by this spring, no one should have to wait more than 8 weeks for a diagnostic test, an attempt to clear the COVID backlog. And yet, back in November 2019, just 5% of waits for diagnostic tests, around 3,800, were longer than the 8-week target. Fast forward 4 years, and nearly 40% of waits were longer than that, over 47,000 of them.
So this is the entrance to the main endoscopy unit. So this is where we do camera tests into people's stomachs or into their bowels. And we're looking for
Di Samuel is a consultant at the Royal Glamorgan Hospital in Llantrisant in South Wales. How do you feel about the fact that so many people are waiting more than 8 weeks for their tests?
It's very uncomfortable because we know that those patients are suffering, either physically or psychologically or both. We know that we are missing the opportunity to potentially intervene at an earlier stage and treat them effectively, prevent longer term complications. And again, as a group of clinicians across Wales, we are worried that this is not coming to an end anytime soon.
On a floor below, Adele Richards is about to have what's called a transnasal endoscopy.
All right, you're going to be fine. You can lean back.
A camera at the end of a thin tube is passed through her nose, then her esophagus and stomach to examine her small bowel for signs of celiac disease.
I'm halfway down your esophagus, so just breathe for me, okay? Close.
This nasal endoscopy method avoids a patient needing sedation and involves fewer staff.
Okay.
It's new for this health board and rare in Wales. It's helping them, we're told, see more patients like Adele within the 8-week target. Adele, how was that?
It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, but once it's passed down and it's in your stomach, yeah, it's fine, yeah.
But as this health board tries to innovate, the picture across Wales remains bleak. In 2019, about 20% of waits for a diagnostic endoscopy took longer than the 8-week target. 4 years on, nearly 2/3 of waits were longer than 8 weeks. 20% were longer than 40 weeks. Charities like Crohn's and Colitis UK say too many people are waiting far too long, a view echoed by others.
I think as a consultant and clinical body, we feel that it is not sustainable for us, it is not fair on patients, and we need clear, robust, longer-term strategies rather than short-term fixes, and the plasters that are being used to cover up the cracks are beginning to rip now.
How far those suspected of cancer are protected from these diagnostic delays in Wales is not clear from the data. But certainly some see delayed tests as a factor behind a recent report comparing 33 similarly wealthy nations, in which Wales ranked near the very bottom for people surviving 3 of the 6 deadliest forms of cancer.
The data that shows us as a nation that is consistently at the bottom of the league of nations with similar healthcare systems to us is an absolute disgrace, if I'm completely honest. We should not be at the bottom of the pile in terms of supporting the patients that we have in Wales who are coming forward with potential cancer, and diagnostics plays a huge part in that. We've got to get to grips with early diagnosis if we're going to transform that.
Increased referrals for suspected cancer have added pressure. The Welsh Government says it's invested £15 million in the diagnostic workforce and facilities and points to a recent drop in waits for endoscopy. But still the backlog of those waiting months on end for often vital tests remains vast. And yet another Welsh Government target looks set to be missed. Which is pretty much what the Welsh Health Minister Leonard Morgan herself conceded in an interview we did earlier. That was after I put it to her that at the current rate of progress, that spring target of making sure everyone in Wales can get a diagnostic test within 8 weeks of waiting was looking like a distant hope.
We set that target. We didn't foresee the massive number of people who have been referred for diagnostic tests with suspected cancer. So we've seen a 53% increase over the last 3 years in the number of people who are being sent for diagnostic tests as a result of suspected cancer.
But just to be clear, are you saying that you are not going to be able to meet this target now?
I think it would be really difficult for us to meet that target in the face of that huge surge in demand. We've now got a very clear strategic programme in relation to diagnostics. We're putting huge investment to try and meet that additional demand. The beginning of that process will start very soon in terms of the additional capacity, but to build up will not be an overnight job because you have to train people up to do that work.
Do you know when the target will be met?
We haven't got a new target as such because we need to make sure that we stabilise and we can calculate if it's going to go even further in terms of the numbers of people who are referred for suspected cancer.
Do you accept that serious harm is being caused as a result of these diagnostic delays, whether that's someone's chances of surviving cancer or someone's ability to live a normal life without pain?
I think things are urgent, they are prioritised. There are obviously people who are suffering, and we're trying to get through in particular those longest waiters as fast as we can, but the urgent cases are always prioritised.
You mention focus on cancer, that's understandable, but there are people with other conditions, particularly relating to the bowel, who are experiencing really significant delays. As Minister responsible for health, what would you like to say to them right now?
Well, clearly I want to apologise for the delays that are occurring, and I hope that there's an understanding that it's because we're testing more people that we're trying to find other people who are in the same situation as them who are suffering. But clearly we are doing everything in our power now to ramp up that diagnostic capacity.
You talk about demand increasing, but there are a lot of issues here which aren't a surprise, are they? Workforce challenges, an ageing population, the availability of new treatments. We've known about that for many years, and your Welsh Labour government has been in charge of the NHS for over 20 years. There have been repeated warnings to get to grips with some of these issues. You're trying to fix a problem that arguably should have been fixed a long time ago.
I think there's a lot of things that we have fixed. So if you look, for example, at the fact that we've already changed the GP contract, so the 8 a.m. bottleneck has gone.
I'm just talking about diagnostics here, and there were warnings many years ago that leadership was needed and investment.
Well, what wasn't foreseen is that 53% increase in the number of people who are being referred on for diagnostic treatments, and that's part of the issue.
Looking ahead, what would you like to say to those people in Wales who look at what's happening in the NHS here at the moment and are frankly scared by what they see?
The vast majority of people are getting an excellent service from the Welsh NHS, but of course we're worried about those people who are not getting the service that they deserve. We're doing everything we can. We're putting significant sums of money, £1 billion over the course of this Senedd term, into trying to bring those waiting lists down. And we're progressing. There's been a 50% reduction in the past year in the number of people waiting the longest. So we are making serious inroads into those waiting lists.
That was the Welsh Health Minister talking to me earlier, and I think it's fair to say in a general election year, the performance of the NHS in each UK nation is only going to get even more political attention as each month passes. That's it from us in Cardiff. Back to you, Jackie.
Andy, thanks very much.